Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy, NerdModon, and today I actually want to talk with you a little bit about the Flame Trooper, considering that I would like to indulge you about some of the historical value of the flamethrowers during World War I. So to start things off, the Flame Trooper is one of 3 elite classes in Battlefield 1. The Flame Trooper is wrapped in fire-resistant gear and does carry a powerful flamethrower. Now, it is worth noting that this elite class is only wrapped in fire-resistant gear, so of course you will still take damage to fire, especially if somebody happens to throw some pyro object at you, or ultimately if you step in this type of element. Now, when you consider that flamethrowers are exceedingly effective in close quarters combat, of course this unit had to be balanced in multiple different areas. In Battlefield 1, we do see the heavy adoption of gas masks, and of course as a due result, this has permanently been asphyxiated onto this elite class. Now, as a result of the Flame Trooper having an asphyxiated mask permanently stuck to his face, of course you will notice that his vision has been slightly lowered from the original value. Now, when you couple his limited vision along with the fact that he's a little bit slower in comparison to other infantry units, this particular class is susceptible from afar due to the fact that he's not able to close the gap nearly as easy as some other infantry units are. Now, in Battlefield 1, we do see the heavy adoption of the WW1 small flamethrower. Now, of course, this was developed in 1917 to replace an earlier version of some of the other flamethrowers that Germany was currently working on. Now, the WW1 flamethrower is a donut-shaped backpack filled container with a spherical propellant container in the middle. Now, this design was later updated during the Second World War to become the flamethrower Model 40. Now, it is worth noting that the Model 40 was considered too fragile, and as a due result, it would soon be replaced by the Model 41, which was a little less fragile in comparison to its predecessor. The Model 41 flamethrower was a simpler construction with smaller horizontal and cylindrical backpack containers, so of course it was a little bit different in comparison to its predecessors before it. So now that we've established the version in Battlefield 1, of course I want to talk a little bit about some of the first flamethrowers that Germany made, considering that these are the more popular portable flamethrowers that were developed a little bit before this particular one came to tuition. Now, the first German manned portable flamethrower was called the flamethrowers, or more commonly known as just Kleef. A very unique aspect of this particular flamethrower is that it was operated by 2 individual soldiers. One soldier was carrying the fuel and the propellant tanks, while the other soldier was wielding the lance. So in this particular case, you did have a little bit more teamwork between these 2 units, but ultimately this also increased their chances of both dying due to the fact that if the flamethrower caught on fire, of course you were probably going to ignite and then both of you would burn to death. Now, while the flamethrowers was considered a small flamethrower, we also see the adoption of large flamethrowers in World War I. The flamethrowers, or more commonly known as the Graf, was designed to be used from the trenches. Now, considering that this flamethrower was designed to be used in trenches, this also meant that it was extremely large and heavy for mobility purposes. Now, considering that it was extremely heavy and the mobility of these particular soldiers was cumbersome due to the fact of its weight, this also meant that it was not really used in open fields. Since trenches were a lot closer to the opposition, this meant that they were able to slowly but surely push their way up to the front lines in these cases. So of course this was really effective against burning or keeping down infantry units, especially if you were on the receiving end of it. So during World War I, we do see multiple different variations of these particular flamethrowers. So during this entire period, there is definitely a huge emphasis on trying to get closer to people in trenches, but also doing a lot of damage to individual units. Now, specialized units that were granted the ability to use flamethrowers tended to be used in groups of 6 during battle. These specialized utensils were mostly used to clear forward defended areas during the start of a German attack. Now, of course, after the initial phase, they would be preceded by infantry colleagues in order to kind of kill remaining enemy foes, or to just kind of sweep up the area ultimately. These weapons were undeniably useful in these specific close-range combat zones, but they of course were very limited in wider effectiveness, so at medium to long range, this particular weapon would cost basically their life in multiple situations. This elite class in the Battlefield franchise has a very interesting role, considering that a lot of the maps really facilitate close to medium range combat, which is definitely where a flamethrower is going to be most effective at. Now, during the open beta, you did see the ability to use this weapon without any limitations, considering that it did have quote-unquote unlimited ammo, so of course you were able to just kind of hold down mouse button 1 and spray and pray for the most part. The flamethrower also had a hidden benefit in that it could also damage some of the lighter vehicles in the Battlefield 1 open beta. So of course if you did see a vehicle kind of chugging by you, you had the ability to do a little bit of damage to it, but of course ultimately you really weren't going to be doing nearly as much as some other alternatives. However, considering that the flamethrower is extremely effective against humanoid targets, of course if you had the ability to light an individual player on fire, of course you would notice that their skin would become charred due to the fact that they were on fire. This was especially noticeable against infantry, but you also had the ability to light some of the horses on fire, which was definitely very interesting to witness, especially as they tried to run away. So the flamethrowers during World War I had a very unique purpose due to the fact that they were trying to limit the amount of defensive positions that were readily available to the opposition. This can also be facilitated in the Battlefield franchise, considering that if you know a lot of players are kind of struck up in a building, of course it is in your best interest to try to neutralize those targets while using pyro. Humanoid figures unfortunately do not have a resistance to fire, and in these particular cases, of course, you will notice that their degradation of their overall character is sufficiently less effective against this particular weapon. Now, it is worth noting that it's yet to be seen in Battlefield 1 if this particular elite class is going to be exceptionally effective on all maps or if it's only unique to a specific few. Now, when you consider that World War I had multiple different theaters of war, I do imagine the adoption of flamethrowers are going to be exceptionally effective against multiple different types of units and ultimately different types of maps that will ultimately come out in the final release of the game. But anyway, guys, I hope you found something in the video insightful and or entertaining, but until the next episode, guys, this has been NMO, and I'm going to be signing out, guys. Peace!